We're here today for the resolution on Rosa Parks Day, and I'm really happy to be here. This is actually an important day in American history, and um, it's for me, it's a time to reflect on our national and local history and the difficult lessons that are learned from the civil rights movement and the continuing struggles to achieve its goals. Every time I talk about this, I think about this interview with Martin Luther King in the mid 60s. He's in Congress and he's trying to get the Civil Rights Act through. And a reporter stops him and is like, sort of like, you seem to be running into problem. People say you're going too fast. And King says, well, they want us to wait another 40 years. And when I saw that, most recently in the movie by James Baldwin, I'm Not Your Negro, I was just struck by the 40 years in the mid 60s. Well, actually, it's 55 years and we're not there yet. So apparently, the length of time that people were expected to wait for equal rights continues to drag on. Rosa Parks engaged in an act that challenged the status quo of her time, the simple act of sitting in a seat on a bus that she was prohibited from sitting in. And she did it in a time in our history when such a challenge to the status quo was fraught with risk. It crystallized the absurdity of a society that felt the need to determine something so basic as where a person was supposed to sit on a bus based on their color. Well, not the first act of defiance against segregation, her act managed to capture the conscience of many Americans, so much so that it's remembered today. While we certainly have made progress since Rosa Parks sat down on the bus, achieving an acceptance of fundamental racial equality remains a persistent challenge in our society, a challenge which we must overcome, and we shall overcome. In this time of COVID, the persistence of that inequality has been laid bare for all to see. We're all aware there's still much work to do in the county government and throughout many of our communities. We are committed to that work, and we remain committed to being a community that constantly works for racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, and equal justice under the law. I want to salute the efforts of the Office of Human Rights and Montgomery County Human Rights Commission as it implements the various civil rights laws carrying out this mandate. And I also want to mention our more recent work in implementing racial equity and social justice initiative. And again, I want to thank Councilmember Nancy Navarro and all the members of the council for their leadership and support of these efforts. We remember Rosa Parks and all of our national and local civil rights champions. We stand in solidarity with them and are thankful of the lessons and of the significance of how the courage of one person can change the world. And as we recognize December 1st as Rosa Parks Day in Montgomery County, we're calling on Montgomery County residents to remember Rosa Parks and her defiant act of courage as well. Be inspired to find ways to improve and promote inclusion and social justice in every neighborhood and community. And I especially want to thank the Human Rights Commission, Office of Human Rights, Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice for your ongoing efforts to provide high quality service, contribute to the betterment of our community, and for providing special leadership in commemorating the observance, especially in this difficult and divisive time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words as well, for not only about Rosa Parks, but certainly because of me as well. I appreciate your kind words. I'm going to ask Director Stowe and then followed by Director Conklin if they had comments as well, please.
First of all, good morning, Mr. President and members of council. I hope and pray that all of you are well and have enjoyed a good Thanksgiving holiday with your families. Rosa Parks Day for me is so significant, and I would just echo what the county executives already said. One of the things we often think about is that Rosa Parks in this day, December 1st, back in 1955, was going home as she always did after work from the department store, going back to Cleveland Avenue, where she lived with her husband. And one of the issues that came up that particular day was that she was asked to give up her seat, and some people confuse that with being asked to seat at the back of the bus. She was already at the back of the bus. She was in the section that was designated for colored patrons, and so she was in her proper seat. But the policy went further to say that if in the front section of the bus, if all the seats were filled and white patrons were not able to get a seat, then they had the opportunity and the right to take then those seats reserved in for in those days, the colored patrons. And so as it turns out, not only would they give up the seat that one sat in, but if there were three other persons in the whole row of seats, all persons had to get up and get off the bus. In many instances, they would have already paid their fare, and in a lot of instances, never got their fare back, by the way, and had to wait on the next bus coming through. Rosa Parks had already been through that situation with this particular driver, where she had to get up out of her seat, and the driver drives off without, again, returning her fare. And so even when sometimes we do the right thing, even sometimes we engage in processes that allows us, in fact, to carry out the rights that are afforded to us as citizens of this great country of ours, even so we are deprived and indignities are thrust upon us as it was even in those days. And so what Rosa Parks illustrates is the power of one, the refusal to let the status quo be the status quo, particularly when it is simply wrong. And so I would just ask all of us to pattern ourselves after a life like Rosa Parks, where we in fact see things that are simply wrong, that we do something about them, that we stand up for justice, that we stand up for the rights of others who may not be able to articulate their own need to be, in fact, advocated for. And so we take this day upon ourselves, and I just appreciate so much our Department of Transportation and the work that they're doing to commemorate this day as well, and the leadership of our county executive. And I would just simply end with this. The Montgomery Bus Boycott was coordinated by the Montgomery Improvement Association, which was coordinated by and led by, I should say, a young man who came to Montgomery, Alabama from Atlanta, Georgia, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. But he said these words: "A man dies when he refuses to stand up for that which is right. A man dies when he refuses to stand up for justice. A man dies when he refuses to stand up for that which is true." And for Rosa Parks, when presented with the moment, she not only stood up steadfast, but she exercised the most powerful force on this earth, and that's the power of one.
Thank you. Thank you. That was beautiful. Director Conklin.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. What I would like to talk about is the inspiration of the courage of Rosa Parks, so that we continue to see and confront the influence of racism, both overt and institutional, that's in our transportation system today. There's a strong correlation between accessibility and race. In recent years, our priorities at the county have shifted towards a commitment to improving public transportation and providing safe environments for walking and bicycling. These are critical ways to ensure access to education and employment opportunities for those communities disadvantaged by racism and who do not have access to a private car that many of us enjoy. Our continued focus on improving equity is essential if we are to reduce the disproportionate number of serious and fatal collisions involving our Black and Latino victims, which is truly unacceptable. We also need to recognize and have the courage to represent the often missing voices from parts of our community that are excluded from, unable to, or uncomfortable with participation in government processes that guide our transportation decisions. Using data to identify needs and recognizing the unheard voices is essential if we are to overcome the legacy of racism that has formed or influenced the formation of our systems today. To celebrate Rosa Parks' courage and our continuing commitment to overcoming racial disparity reinforced by our transportation system, we are proud to commemorate this day by placing placards at all of our transit vehicles and through promotion of Rosa Parks' courage and action in our social media and through our ongoing and policy and program efforts. We are truly inspired by Rosa Parks' courage, and I commit all of us to continuing to address these issues and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. One of the real pleasures of doing proclamations is that it makes me, and I'm sure others, go back and read again why you were a person. We've all heard about Rosa Parks our whole lives. I mean, Rosa Parks just passed away 15 years ago. She died in 2005. She was certainly a part of our life. She was a member of our community, of our world, my entire life, or up until when she passed away. And I did want to recognize, before I forget, that Tiffany Ward is here as well, and we thank you, Tiffany, for all that you're doing. We should not have a proclamation about Rosa Parks without Tiffany Ward being here with us. But so, and I appreciate Director Stowe's talking about the history of what Rosa Parks did. And I was going to mention it as well. There's no need to mention it twice. But one of the things that I really enjoyed reading was quotes from Rosa Parks. And I have just a few, and we're going to get to the proclamation that the county executive and I will read. But this is what she said. All I was doing was trying to get home from work. My only concern was to get home after a hard day's work. Our mistreatment was just not right, and I was tired of it. I knew someone had to take the first step, and I made up my mind not to move. Each person must live their life as a model for others. That one is worth repeating as well. Each person must live their life as a model for others. We thank Rosa Parks for doing just that and teaching us to do just that. And with that, Mr. County Executive, would you like to lead off reading the proclamation, please?
Okay, are you going to flash that proclamation up there?
Well, I'm not, but hopefully
okay, then
someone.
I will read it off my thing here. Okay. Whereas Ms. Rosa Louise Macaulay Parks is an American hero. Her courage and moral clarity in the face of bigotry and oppression highlighted the civil rights movement and inspired millions to stand up for fundamental fairness. And
whereas on December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks' refusal to give up her seat to a white man on a Montgomery, Alabama bus, and her silent, determined defiance gave voice to millions in their fight against injustice and intolerance. And
whereas Ms. Parks' arrest sparked the December 5th boycott of city buses by 42,000 African Americans, which helped change the course of America. And
whereas this act was called the Montgomery Bus Boycott, which lasted 381 days and ended on December 21st, 1956, with the U.S. Supreme Court ruling in November 13th, 1956, that segregation on city buses was unconstitutional. And
whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had formed the Montgomery Improvement Association and led the mass movement of the bus boycott, propelling the nonviolent resistance into what would be called the civil rights movement. And
whereas Rosa Parks' heroism that day showed that one person can change the course of history and inspire the change in the hearts of a nation. She is remembered as the mother of the civil rights movement. And during her life, she said, "I'd like for everybody to remember me as a person who wanted to be free." Now, therefore, do we, Mark Elrich as County Executive and Sidney Katz as County Council President of the Montgomery County, Maryland, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, December 1st, 2020 as Rosa Parks Day in Montgomery County. We urge all our residents to remember Ms. Parks' unshakable commitment to a better world and her fearless will to battle injustice at tremendous risk to herself for the sake of the greater good. We must continue the movement toward a more fair and just society for all. And it's signed today by County Executive Mark Elrich and me as County Council President. Thank you all very, very much.